Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam, wa rasulullah. Welcome to We Are All Okay Wednesday. We're up to the letter U. U is for uneasy. When your heart feels unsettled, but certainty is closer than you think. So what we'll cover is the unease thrives in uncertainty. When we lose sight of Allah's wisdom, the unknown can feel overwhelming. Listening to what's beneath the unease, often feeling uneasy, is a sign of that we need to slow down, reflect, and realign our trust with Allah. And that certainty comes through surrendering, that the true ease is found not in controlling the outcomes, but in submitting your heart fully to the one who controls all things. In fact, submitting and accepting the qadr of Allah. Alhamdulillah. And I love using props and things. And so I have my plasma thing here. And I thought this was a really, if you can see it, it's a bit hard to see. I put dark clothes on so it would be a highlight between it. But you see all the light going in all different, directions. That's like what our head is like when we feel uneasy, right? All over the place, subhanAllah. But when we have a good connection with Allah, this is what happens. It all sort of comes together in a nice, calm position. And so I thought, I'll just demonstrate that before we get into it, subhanAllah. So the first part was how unease thrives in uncertainty. And uncertainty is an interesting one. We spend a lot of time trying to be certain of things, trying to be certain that we're making the right decision, trying to be certain that things are the way that are pleasing to Allah. And I'm not suggesting for a second that these aren't good intentions. They certainly are. But one of the things that we are not seeing that leads us into the unease and the uncertainty is that the only things that are truly certain is that Allah exists and that we will die. And everything else is actually uncertain. And so one of the biggest insights I think that takes away the unease of uncertainty is to accept the fact that there is no such thing as certainty in this dunya, that the future is in Allah's hands and will unfold according to Allah's plans, to how He has decreed it to be. And so how do we find certainty despite just not knowing what's going to come? The certainty comes from the certainty in Allah's word. And what is Allah's word? Well, primarily it's the Quran. And what has Allah told us in the Quran? That He will never burden us with more than we can bear. So even if we don't know what's going to happen, it's okay because we will be able to bear it. Alhamdulillah, right? That he's already told us that in the remembrance of Allah hearts finds rest. So we will find that ease when we're remembering Allah, which kind of leads, to the next point, which is to listen to what's beneath the unease, because it's often a sign to slow down, reflect, and realign with trusting in Allah. Well, what we call that is like a love letter from Allah, that when we're having certain feelings that aren't feelings of yaqeen, of certainty, feelings of tawakkul, that it's actually indicating to us that the way we are looking at it, whatever it is that we're having unease about, we've forgotten about Allah somehow. That doesn't mean we've forgotten about Allah blanket full stop. I'm not suggesting that for a second, because we're, always in remembrance of Allah in one way or another. Inshallah you are. But in this particular matter that we're having unease in, there's somehow we have forgotten Allah. And somehow we've got into our head that somehow we have to figure it out and we have to be certain of what we've figured out. And because we're trying to be certain about what is uncertain, we've actually set an expectation for ourselves that can't be met. We can never be certain. Not through our intellectual thinking anyway, not through figuring it out in our head, not through this type of all over the place thinking. That is not where we're going to find certainty, is it? You know, all that thinking that's going everywhere. And that's what happens when we've lost sight of Allah. That's where our thinking goes. We're maybe mapping out every case scenario we can think of and how will we respond to every case scenario we can think of, or we're weighing up all the pros and the cons, and we're handling everything from a very intellectual, very dunya focused space. And so the slowing down and reflecting part is to notice that. So not to notice the content of our thought and what is it I'm thinking about, but notice how we've got caught up in the idea that somehow I'm meant to figure this out and be certain of what I've figured out. Because that's not where certainty comes from. It comes from realigning with our trust in Allah. And so what we say it back to the fitra is, and it's not that we don't use our intellect, and it's not that we don't seek knowledge or any of those sorts of things. It's about an added element that goes with those, which is the key element that leads to a sense of certainty. And that is what we call being in our wisdom. And what we define as being in our wisdom is when we're in a state of being truly connected to Allah and aware of how Allah is guiding us. Now, interestingly, I had a moment this morning, which is a beautiful example of how Allah is guiding us in every single given moment, right? So it's a very simple thing. It's not a big deal or anything. It's just a simple thing, but I noticed it, right? And this is why it's really important to notice even these tiny things and be grateful for them, because then Allah blesses us with so much more, alhamdulillah, as He's promised. But so this morning, my son, he took off from school before he came and got money for his lunch. And so I rang him and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I won't eat." But because I'd realized he'd left to walk for the bus and that it wasn't that long ago because I heard when the door shut, I decided to throw on my hijab and chase after him to give him some money. Now, I was going to drive straight up our street to the main road because the bus stop was on the main road. And as I was driving, something said to me in the moment, turn right, because there's a different way you could go where you turn right and you turn left to get up to the main road. Something in that moment changed my intention, and at the last moment said, no, turn right and turn left. And that's where he was, because he walked that way instead of going straight up our street. Now, that might seem like a very simple thing, but it's the perfect example of how Allah is guiding us in every given moment. That wasn't my intellect. That was a thought that popped into my mind. It's Allah guiding me in the moment. Because if I had, gone the wrong way, chances are he might have got on the bus before I could actually reach him. And because my intention was, to do something good, Allah helped facilitate that in that moment. SubhanAllah. Now, that little thing is an example of what's happening to us constantly every single day. If we are aware of it, if we are conscious, if we are not having our head filled with all this type of thinking, which then gets in the way of us actually noticing in the moment how Allah is guiding us. Having those little moments of intuition, might be called intuition or gut feeling, or people have lots of words to describe it. But we call it like, being in our wisdom and being guided by Allah and then listening to how we're being guided or following how we're being guided by Allah. Because that's where the sense of feeling of certainty comes from. It comes from surrendering to the fact that we do not have control of anything. We actually don't even have control of our own thinking. Because I didn't control that thought that I just gave you an example of. That popped into my head without me consciously trying to make that happen. I wasn't in the car seat going, oh, I wonder which way he went. It didn't even occur to me when I first took off that there could be two ways that he might walk. I was heading straight up the main street, straight up our street. So the certainty comes through surrendering to the fact that Allah is the one that is in control. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no power or might except in Allah. And, hasbi Allah, Allah is sufficient for us. He is only what we need. So it's not up to us to try and control the outcomes. It's us to submit fully to the qadr of Allah. Submit fully to the fact that Allah is the one who controls it. Our job is to ask ourselves a simple question in this moment. What am I meant to be doing right now for the sake of Allah? So then when we get into our wisdom, where we're not rattling around in our head like this, and we're connected to Allah, and we're submitting to the fact that Allah is guiding us and He knows best, this is what our mind looks like. That certainty. We know which direction to go in the moment. I actually quite like this demonstration because see how the line is still kind of moving around. That's life. Life is always pivoting and moving around, but still with all that movement, there's clarity. There's one answer. There's one direction in that moment, right? It might move around here and there from time to time, but there's still that clarity. And that's where the certainty comes from. And that's where you move into a state of ease in your mind, and where that unease dissolves. I think dissolves or falls away, or I really like words where it seems simple because it actually is. Because in that moment when it happens, you didn't have to try and make it happen. It just, the minute you fall into that state of tawakkul, totally trusting that Allah's got this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding you, that there's nothing you need to figure out in this moment other than what am I meant to be doing right now? Because this is the only moment that exists. So when you feel in an uneasy state, when you feel like your brain is like this, where everything is going all over the place, it's simply a message to say, or a message, an opportunity to slow down and ask, where have I forgotten Allah? Where am I thinking I have to be responsible for figuring this out? Or where I've put myself as being the one who controls when in fact it's Allah. Stuff for Allah to think that we ever think that. We don't consciously think that, but our thinking is leading us in that direction, subhanallah. So I'd really love to open up the room now to any questions you might have or any takeaways you might have around this topic of U is for uneasy. And I hope you like my little demo because I love little demos. I think they speak 1,000 words, Who recognizes, this mindset, the one where the thinking is all over the place. SubhanAllah, I certainly get that from time to time. Even still, after all these years of this understanding, I'll have times where my brain is doing that. Alhamdulillah. Anyone got a question? You can actually we help to open up the chat to see if anyone wrote in the chat. No, not yet. Not a question anyway. If you haven't got a question, I'd love to hear a takeaway. What did you find beneficial or interesting about what I shared today? What about you, Sister Zamila? Do you have a takeaway from today? Or Mahmouda, do you have a takeaway from today? I want to ask if us feeling as easy in certain situations is because of a lack of tawakkul. Well, that's what I'm kind of saying is yes, not a lack of tawakkul in general, but maybe a lack of tawakkul in that particular issue, in that particular moment. Um, there's difference. The type of uneasy I'm talking about is when your mind is like this uneasy, right? Um, there are some times when, for instance, you go into a situation and you have an instant uneasy feeling. That can be, Allah guiding you, to be aware that whether you're in a, watch out, be, don't trust this situation or these people or this moment, to be aware. I'm not talking about that uneasy feeling. It's a different uneasy feeling. That is coming from Allah's guidance, coming from, warning you about the situation you find yourself in. I'm talking about this uneasy where the mind is going all over the place and you're feeling uneasy, trying to figure out how you're going to deal with something or navigate something or whatever. And that is suggesting that in that particular matter, in this particular moment, you're having a lack of tawakkul. Um, you might have tawakkul in many other things at that same moment, but in this particular issue that you're thinking about, you're not having a sense of tawakkul. You've forgotten, that Allah's there guiding you, that Allah's the one that's in control, that it's in His hands, and that He'll never burden you with more than you can bear. So even if it turns out the worst case scenario, you will have the means to bear it because He's not going to put you in any position that you're not resourced to manage. SubhanAllah. Samila says, I like the demo. My kind feel frazzled but need to focus on one thing. My mind feels frazzled but need to focus on one thing, on Allah. Yeah. And isn't that amazing how if we just focus on Allah, everything else falls into place? Alhamdulillah. This doesn't mean that uh, it's going to be easy, meaning that whatever it is that we're going through is going to be a walk in the park, because this life is a test, right? It's that we will have ease here in our mind and here in our heart as we go through what might not be an easy test or challenge. That's the difference. So the ease we were talking about is the internal ease. That doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome externally is going to be easy. And I think it's really important to understand the difference, because sometimes we have this expectation, okay, if I put my trust in Allah and rely upon Allah, He's going to make it easy for me. He's going to make you have ease through it and have the resilience and the resources to get through it. But He never promised that this life was going to be easy. He promised us that we will be tested, right? And tests aren't meant to be easy, because if it's easy, it's not a test, is it? So sometimes we get ourselves in knots because we create expectations that aren't right. There are other times, of course, though, when you expect something's going to be really testing and challenging, and because you've put your trust and reliance in Allah, He's actually made it really smooth and easy for you. And in those moments, Alhamdulillah, like so much gratitude to Allah for facilitating that, right? But we don't have the expectation that we're going to have an easy life. In fact, when everything's super easy, sometimes I'm a little concerned, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do you think you can say I believe and not be tested? And so and that we know that He tests those that He loves, and He tests those that are the best of his kind with the hardest of tests. So if it gets really easy, I start thinking, am I doing enough? Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So, are there any other takeaways before we wrap this up for today?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, dear Sister Catherine. That was amazing. It's very inspiring, and it makes things so clear. Each time, each session that we're with you, it makes our minds very clear and hearts at ease. And subhanallah, jazakallah khairan. Thank you.
Why, Yaki, sis. And it's really the reason why you feel at peace is because the whole session is about Allah, isn't it? And remembering Allah, and that's where the peace comes from. It just comes from the fact that we're here together, alhamdulillah, focused on Allah. Alhamdulillah. So just, yeah, I think unfortunately Sister Rahila's missed what we were sharing, but there will be the recording uploaded usually within the next few hours, inshallah. So nothing is lost. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for being here. I enjoyed sharing my little plasma ball. I think they're called plasma globes if you ever want to get one and use it as a demo, because it is really cool to demonstrate with. Kids love it, because it's so cool when you put your hand there and it goes straight. Just a little tip though, don't put it in your luggage that you check in at the airport, because I had a different one that I took to do a presentation, and I put it in my luggage, and something about going up under pressure messed it up, and it doesn't do that whole clear thing anymore. So when I came to do my demonstration, it didn't work. But alhamdulillah, I found another one, and so now I can use it as a demo. Alhamdulillah. All right, everybody. See you next week, inshallah. So we've just done letter U, so that means we're up to letter V. I'm not quite sure what we're doing for letter V. You'll get to find that out closer to the day, inshallah. So we're getting there. U, V, W, X, Y, Z. We've got 5 more to go, and we've finished the alphabet, inshallah. See you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, Sister Rahila, sorry about that. We've just finished, but the recording will be up within the next couple of hours, and you can catch that in the We Are All Okay membership in the school site, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.